Imagine the living room of your dreams. What do you see? A nice sofa, some plants, some framed pictures, maybe a bookshelf full of books. But would you make a space in that living room to set up an office? Or a space for your kids to play when their school's closed? In very little time, the concept of the ideal living room has changed, because throughout history, interior design has always reflected changes in our lifestyle. Safety and practicality have been a constant consideration when creating the environments we live in. But comfort and beauty, well, those couldn't have transformed any more radically.
Then explosion 3 miles into the sky, belching fury that dwarfs the man-made war nearby.
Thanks to this volcano, we can learn a lot about interior design in ancient Rome. Vesuvius burned Pompeii in the year 79, turning it into a fossil city. Excavations show us that the bedrooms, even those of the nobility, were tiny, and that the most important spaces in homes were dining rooms and the atrium, a social gathering space. Houses had very little furniture, and the main decorative elements were rich frescoes painted on their walls. Rather than eating while sitting down, people reclined on a triclinium, the ancestor of the couch. Although it might seem unbelievable, it took a long time for chairs to become indispensable. Invented in Egypt 4,800 years ago, they were initially very low and not as widely used, since people sat with their legs crossed and often on the floor. These had nothing to do with the sophisticated and beautiful chairs of later centuries. During the Renaissance, chairs adopted luxurious silk upholstery and high backrests to accommodate the increasingly large and elaborate dresses worn by the ladies of the flourishing bourgeoisie. In the post-medieval period, the major innovations in furniture and in the organization of spaces had to do with the emergence of a previously unheard-of concept: privacy. During feudalism, lords and vassals lived together in gray and uncomfortable castles. But in the Renaissance home, each person had his or her own private space. This change led to new developments, such as dressing tables with mirrors, wallpaper, upholstered sofas with turned legs, iron plate stoves, and central heating. Craftsmen dedicated to creating furniture and decorative objects enjoyed growing fame as they created beautiful and more affordable solutions. Adam, Hepplewhite, Chippendale, Sheridan, and many other furniture masters became synonymous with their creations, lending their names to pieces that have survived to the present day. But that's nothing compared to what happened at the turn of the 20th century, when Art Nouveau brought on a new era, one of celebrity architects and designers, two disciplines which are now completely mainstream. Driven by steel, glass, and other materials that were continuously rolling off the production lines of the Industrial Revolution, this movement produced great artists such as Louis Majorelle and Hector Guimard, Victor Horta, Charles-René Mackintosh, and Antoni Gaudí. For them, the future had arrived, and it was full of curves, feminine figures, and Eastern and tropical elements. However, not everyone was convinced by this idea of modernity. In England, the famous designer William Morris was leading a movement that revived pre-industrial craftsmanship techniques. His style, known as arts and crafts, with its hand-painted tiles, stained glass, and furniture inspired by the medieval era, fit in perfectly with the conservative atmosphere of the Victorian period. On the other side of the Atlantic, in the United States, they were already filling their growing metropolises with reinforced concrete. This material, invented in Germany, allowed skyscrapers with simple, powerful lines to be built. One of the most famous architects and designers, Frank Lloyd Wright, reproduced these shapes in the spectacular furniture he designed for the Larkin Building in New York, and several of his other projects. This practical modernism, with no unnecessary luxuries, created a new school of design. In Germany and the Netherlands, two movements inspired by modernist ideas revolutionized interior design. But first, the world would face a crisis that would bring its long era of prosperity and peace to an end. World War I led to an exodus from the countryside to cities, forcing people to live in smaller and smaller spaces. In this context, the Dutch De Stijl movement and the German Bauhaus school formed the basis of what could be called a middle-class style, without luxuries or excess. An aesthetic seen in the rational lines of pieces like the classic Wassily chair and Barcelona chair, true design icons. In France, Charlotte Perriand, Le Corbusier, and Pierre Jeanneret put into practice their ideas of architecture and interior design, conceived for an increasingly egalitarian society of increasing consumption. Always compact and mass-produced, their steel and chrome furniture, such as the pieces from the Grand Comfort line, have become timeless design staples. Time went on, and the war became a distant memory, and the desire to be individual and unique emerged again. Art Deco brought on new luxury, now based on the straight lines of modernism, but replete with elaborate stained glass, exotic animal skin upholstered sofas and chairs, ivory details, and objects made of noble metals such as bronze and silver. The designs created by Irish designer Eileen Gray, which are full of ebony and rare furs, are emblematic of this era. Farther north, something would change the course of interior design once again. Inspired by the ancestral homes of Scandinavia, the so-called Nordic style became synonymous with discreet sophistication. With simple elements such as light wood, neutral colors, conical angled legs, and straight lines. Danish designer Arne Jacobsen synthesized this style's sense of elegance in his egg chair, which was spread across the world by global brands such as the Swedish IKEA. As the world faced strong economic growth and globalization, houses became increasingly similar. With regional differences in terms of materials, shapes, and especially price, the same furniture and design elements were duplicated in living rooms, bedrooms, offices, and public spaces. The way we organize our environments brings us closer and creates a sense of belonging. However, interior design doesn't conform to standards or limitations. It's based on a simple and immutable logic proposed by William Morris in the 19th century, that few things bring us greater well-being than living in a nice house.